Greetings and welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Poly Weekly News. I'm back. I'm back from PTO, and you can hear I caught a bit of a cold on the way, so I'm dealing with that. This is going to be an interesting show this week because we're talking to two of my favorite Microsoft experts, my colleague Joe Dalecki and our industry expert, Tom Arbuthnot with Empowering Cloud. And we want to talk a little bit about change in general and change control and change on the Microsoft Teams platform. And then they're going to give us some insights as to some of the great changes that are coming up on the platform going forward. So before we get into all of that, Joe, let me give you the chance. Introduce yourself. Tell everybody who might not know you, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. My name is Joe Dalecki. I'm a senior solution architect here at Poly HP, focused specifically on Microsoft and Teams rooms.
Thank you, Joe. And Tom, same question to you.
Yeah, hey everybody, Tom Arbuthnot. I run a company called Empowering Cloud, and we have a Teams industry professional community. So about just tipped over 3,000 people on there, lots of content from experts and MVPs, basically.
Terrific. Thank you both for being on. And both of you are return guests. I guess we got to break out, like the Saturday Night Live 5-time jackets or something like that for anybody who's been on the show for a long time. But anyway, the interesting thing happened. I was speaking to an end user firm a few weeks ago. And they asked me a question: how do you manage change control coming down from platforms when there are changes on the system? And I really thought it was a stupid question because if we're talking about 1980s and 1990s, you take the platform, you put it into your lab, you check it out, you make sure that there's no issues with outside penetration and that the changes work for you. And then if you like it, you roll it out to your people. And if you don't, you wait, you skip it, you go to the next one. And the way it works nowadays is you wake up in the morning and open your computer and somebody agile on some side has pushed something down to you and you try and figure out how to do what you used to do yesterday. I don't think that anybody is managing the changes. Tom, what are you seeing from your perspective?
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. It's how do you cope with change rather than how do you manage change now, unfortunately. And this is part of getting on cloud platforms, and Microsoft are definitely pushing a lot of changes, but other cloud platforms do the same thing now. And the interesting thing is Microsoft and the other ecosystems want adoption, so they're very aggressively pushing features direct to users. There are some things you can do. There are preview programs, but it's more managing the change that is definitely going to happen as opposed to choosing what you deploy these days.
And Joe, what are our customers saying? What are you experiencing out there with some of the Poly MTRs?
Yeah, so I talk to customers every day who are dealing with the pace of change and dealing with the actual end users in the rooms. And it's a very rapid acceleration, especially around Teams today, from where we were even a few months or a few years ago. And so users are definitely learning to deal with that and adapt to that as we move forward. And you're seeing that adaptability even come into the next generation in the workforce as well, too. So I think this is just the way forward. I think this is how people they just deal with it. And they're learning to expect the unexpected when they walk in the conference room a little bit more, and just have their meetings and make the best of it. But they're also enjoying some of the new features that we're seeing, come out every few months. So,
like one of the examples that we were talking about when we were setting up this conference was there's a little box underneath every chat on the lower right side, at least from my instance of Microsoft Teams. And when you hit the box with the arrow, it lets you record a video that you can then post to the room. And if you want to say something because you don't feel like typing, or you really want to get the inflection right, or you want to do a video message, it's literally there on every chat. And I would swear from the people that I deal with, maybe 1 or 2% of the people know that it's there. And that's just one example of probably hundreds, if not thousands, of features that most people, take the entire catalog of what's out there on the platform and maybe use 1 or 2 or 3% of it. I mean, that's not just my perception, is it?
No, I think that's right, and it's an interesting challenge for the whole industry because, as Joe says, that like software now just updates. So in mobile ecosystems, we get a new version of iOS or Android, and it has features, and that's the way it works. Same with mobile apps. So that's the model. Microsoft, to take them as an example, customers get annoyed if Microsoft proactively push training content or updates to users because they're like, no, I own the users, so don't you tell them what to do, I'll tell them what to do. But then most organizations don't have the bandwidth or the skills to educate those users, so they're in a catch-22 where the software isn't going to slow down. They do produce some content, but really, ideally, an enterprise of someone of that scale should have a product owner for these products. Even though they're not owning the infrastructure, they're owning the service, the adoption, the experience, and that person should be aware of the blogs, the updates, the preview program, so they know what's coming down the pipe, so they can say, is this useful in my organization? Do I want to proactively push it? Do I want to get feedback from users during preview? There's a new job to do there that didn't used to exist, and a lot of organizations, unfortunately, in a SaaS world, UCaaS world, have said, oh, it's just, we don't need to manage it because Microsoft give it to us, or Zoom give it to us, or WebEx give it to us. Well, no, you do need to manage it. You just need to manage different things.
The role of the in-room documentation has changed, and I think where I now push back on is I don't want to recreate the quick reference card for the room every 2 months because there's a new feature or a new button. So I'd much rather train the users to just be adaptable and curious, but not as easily frustrated by new features, so that they just start to build that confidence that the technology is going to keep improving. They're still going to be able to do everything they used to do, but there might be a new feature, and go explore, and not just make every meeting about the meeting, but go and explore the technology and start to use some of the new features. So once you get comfortable with that, I think it's a much easier road to adoption.
There's an interesting article in the Harvard Business Review a couple of days ago about digital transformation and the pace of digital change. And it was an interesting stat that said a couple of years ago, the percentage of people that were adaptable to change was in like roughly the 70 percentile. And nowadays it's closer to 42%. That I think that people, and I've been saying this for years, but that people are starting to get upset about change for change's sake. When you walk into your desktop in the morning and you open it up, and what used to be on the right is now on the left, or what used to be 1 click is now 3 clicks deep. And people are struggling to say, well, why are we doing it? Is this just developers justifying their operation, or have we really improved the product? So I'm wondering, do you hear that same feedback as well? Do we have the right level of gatekeepers, both with the platform and with the service offerings, as you point out, Tom?
Yeah, you definitely hear that frustration of users are just overwhelmed with change. I think Joe touched on something really well there, which is confidence. So I won't segment people by age, but if you think about different demographics, some people have that confidence of like, this probably won't break. I can click the buttons, I'll find my way through, like I'll give it a go. And some people are absolutely frozen. I heard an enterprise deal with support calls, and they said that even with click to join, with the join button being green, they'd get people ringing up IT in the room and saying, what do I do? And it's like, well, press the join button. Everything worked perfectly. They just weren't confident to have a go. Yeah. But I do think, to your point, everything is metric driven in the cloud, and the UCaaS vendors have access to see what people are doing, and they want to push people to do things. So they do toy with the experience, say, oh, people aren't discovering that we have front row, or we have avatars. What if we changed it to this layout or that layout to get people to be aware of it? But I would concede there could be with a gatekeeper who's like, no, just slow down. Is there a really good reason to do this, or are we just playing with it to move the metrics?
And we do a lot of that internally here as well. I mean, we are constantly listening to customer feedback, not just on future roadmap decisions and software improvements, but also on the way things work today. And we can always sort of tweak based on the general perception of what a feature does or how it works. So we're constantly iterating and listening to that feedback. So it's not just about change for change's sake, but it's based on real metrics that we're able to track and verify and say, is this a valuable change? Does this actually improve the quality of our meetings if we, cut to Joe sooner, a quarter of a second sooner, or do we wait and make it more of a human-based transition? It's more attention-based. So all of those little things that we're doing to sort of improve the experience without putting more control in the user's hand, and just let the meeting happen. So
yeah, I guess to counter arguments as well, like we've all worked, all of us have been around for a while. We've worked in enterprise IT, enterprise AV. If you give IT the option to not do things, they generally don't do them. They'll stay on the original version. They won't get round to patching. So we used to have this problem in the server days where OCS and Link and Skype, where customers wouldn't roll out the cumulative updates. They wouldn't roll out the updates. So Microsoft would do all this work to build these features, and a tiny fraction of users would ever get to have them. So while we have got some friction around the change, at least we're getting the pace of development, the pace of feedback is better than it's ever been.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of the key updates that you'll see even in the next few months that we're going to talk about today, a lot of what you'll see when it comes to AI and biometrics and all of those types of things are all sort of erring on the side of opt-in, right? So it's not forced change to disrupt more of the IT admin's role, but opt in when your organization is ready, when your users are ready. And I think that makes sense a lot of times for anything that might seem really disruptive in
Yeah,
the
like the UI change on the Windows MTRs.
exactly.
You can flag to do that or not do that at your own pace. It's nice to see Microsoft give IT admins those options.
Yep.
So Joe, since you opened up the can of worms, I'm going to come back to you. Both of you actually, over the last couple of days, have posted. Here's what's coming to MTR and Microsoft Teams rooms and things like that. Joe, your list a couple of days ago was
Yeah.
17 items long.
Yeah, so there's a lot coming.
All right,
Yeah.
so regale us, hit us for what we should be hitting, and you guys can take turns. But
Yeah, no, I
let's,
mean,
let's get
I'm gonna run out before Joe, I think.
yeah. Well, I just did a quick 2-minute video that showed what came in update 1 that was in March, and that had some great quality of life features, and I think just really improved, some of the layout options and things like that, and it adds chat and things like that. So some of the components of a meeting that we use every day now on both Windows and Android. So I think just in general, and if you look at the roadmap, you'll see this too, where there used to be a significant delay between a feature coming out on Windows and then much later on Android. You're seeing a much quicker time to feature parity on Windows and Android. I tell a lot of customers that we have seen that pace of adoption and acceleration.
There's some insider baseball there where they were 2 different teams and now they're rolling up into the same team. So like that parallel is getting closer and closer, and like the UI change is a massive one. Like users don't know. Plenty of organizations are mixing and matching Windows and Android for different use cases, and they want the experience to be as similar as possible for those users.
I got to print up and make up the t-shirts that say "and not or." That's our slogan for this year. And not or. Keep going, Joe. What else?
No, so it's certainly great to see that there's big updates now in the pipeline for both Windows and Android. For update 2 on Android, and then for update 4.17 to the Teams app on Windows. So just to start with Android, since we're there, camera updates are going to be the big thing. So there's now going to be support for additional USB cameras in Teams rooms on Android. So Tom, I don't know if you've got a lot of customers that are, banging down your door for content cameras and things like multiple camera perspectives and things like that. But it's a big deal on Windows to be able to change cameras. And so this, starts to get us toward sort of that different perspective.
Yeah. And if you think where we're going, you mentioned it, things like, Director and other OEMs equivalents, like you can see where we're going with multicam. Right now it's switching, but you can see a world in the future where we've got multiple cameras coming in and multiple angles. It's going to get really exciting.
Yeah. So there's a lot still to come there, but I think the first step is to get USB cameras. So that's going to be a big thing on Android, and a big jump towards feature parity from Windows and Android. So content camera ingest, USB camera support on Android, and smart camera control. So being able to, smart camera PTZ, the camera for Teams rooms on Android, that's a big one. And then some default layout control. So a lot of administrators have this challenge of what layout do I set for that room, right? Do I set it in front row and that's every meeting? Or is there a better default layout for a particular room? So having a default layout that it always resets back to, no matter what the users do in the room, that will help sort of stabilize the experience.
What about your list, Tom? What were the big features you were excited about coming?
Yeah, one of the ones I'm most excited about is Microsoft adding Net Promoter Score surveys into Teams rooms. So you might see these on the Teams client. Occasionally it will ask you, how was your experience? And particularly if it thinks there's something to feedback on. They're going to do the same thing in rooms. So occasionally the room console upon leaving the meeting will say, hey, how was your experience? And I always like it when that option's there, because then you're gathering feedback from the users, whereas normally that they're not going to be proactive and raise a ticket if they've got feedback. But if you pop up a star rating, they might well give you the feedback. So that's one of the things I'm excited about.
Yeah, anytime you can get actionable insight and feedback from your users directly, it's very helpful to help improve that experience, both from an internal enterprise perspective and also from platform perspective. So on the Windows side, there's a ton of big things really coming. The biggest, I think, is the Windows 11 migration from Windows 10 now IoT to Windows 11 IoT. And all of that is today you can actually opt in to that update to test it. So if you look at Microsoft's release notes, there is an optional update now that you can go download and manually get Windows 11. And I would recommend doing that in a few of your devices, especially, David, as you mentioned, in the lab. Start testing your devices, make sure it's stable, make sure everything works, make sure all of your firmware and drivers and peripherals work just the way you expect. And I would definitely recommend doing that, because now in June, that's when it's going to be automatic. So you have a few months here to test.
Yeah. I'm one of the people that is very reluctant to update anything. The only time I'll ever update is if what I'm using isn't working. So I had been on Windows 7 for like ever, but then it just, the Scotch tape and the Band-Aids were falling off. finally had to get a new notebook. I bought an HP Pavilion, personally, my own money, and it's on Windows 11, and I'm liking Windows 11. The only thing I'm not liking about Windows 11 is that it doesn't give you the ability to never combine, to look at the tiles on the bottom of the screen. I know that's an often asked for feature when you have multiple windows open for a browser. You have to cursor over it and peek, and it's hard getting used to that. But other than that, I found it to be a very stable platform, and I'm using Teams and using other things on it. It's actually really good. So we used to make the old joke in the industry about Windows operating systems were like Star Trek movies, only every other one was good. But I'm glad it's a new one coming out that's good.
10 and 11 are fairly mature, and the changes are getting incremental, like you say, the UI changes. So the early feedback, and I'm glad, to Joe's point, Microsoft are letting people test on Windows 11 early, and you absolutely should test. But Microsoft are taking this slow and steady, which is nice to see, because changing an underlying OS is a big deal, and you want your rooms to be always available. So yeah, I as Joe said, like, test it in some lab rooms. And back to your point early on about people should test, like there's a job to do there. If you manage a fleet of these rooms, you should have one in a lab, one in the IT center that you put early, then have some user facing machines that you put on early, so you get the not just the it rebooted and it looks like it's running Windows 11's all good. Have users running on an early unit, so you get the feedback of interactions and experience as well.
And Joe, I saw a lot of things on your list that had to do with view. Whether we're talking about the view of front row or together mode or breakout rooms. I think they're really starting to tweak how you can see things on collaboration.
It's all about the experience. Yeah. So the view, I mean, when you think back a year ago to when they first showcased front row, right, it had all the gray backgrounds for the video gallery, right? So everybody had to simultaneously set their background to be that gray background. Well, this is that feature. So this is where Microsoft will allow you to set a uniform background for all of the remote participants, so that it actually looks like they're sitting in a gallery essentially across the table from the folks in the room, which is great because you're not distracted by the backgrounds behind people in that row. And that's really what that experience is designed for. It's designed to be immersive. It's designed to feel like they're in the room with us. And so that's a big one for me. The other one is the custom backgrounds on not only the front room screens, but also the touch screen in the front. So our GC8 now will have the ability to have its own custom background. And one of my customers I just talked to last week, I said, this is a great way to help your users, because now I can put some of the helpful information about that join button that nobody wants to press to join their meeting. I can put a little arrow and say, click here to join your meeting. And now that can help sort of drive the experience. So
I see some partners putting QR codes on the background so that people can go for support, and it even understands what type of room they're in and where they are, so it gives relevant support, which I thought was a really clever way to do it and solve that problem you mentioned, Joe, about you don't want the printed out tents that are out of date the second you printed them. You can update the support centrally and you get a really nice experience.
Yeah, and one of the things we used to do early on with a feature like that, whenever we were talking about custom touch panels, was create a dial help button. So there was an always active operator available right on the front screen. You could hit it, they would remote into the room and walk through anybody that was having any kind of difficulty. We didn't see a lot of companies doing that, but the ones that did really had a great experience with it.
A panic button.
Well, a come help me button, because I'm more
Yeah,
important than you are, and my meeting's more important, and I have people from
yeah, that
around the world, and there's no time. One of the things that generally IT has been terrible with, and we're improving only slightly now, is the idea of when the ticketing system should be how you track the help you're providing. It shouldn't be the process of providing help. So when early on in the collaboration days, you would call a help desk would start putting in a ticket, and you would have to explain, no, you don't understand. I have 20 people here in 5 cities. I don't have time to put in a ticket. I need fix now.
mm.
So you getting people to understand the warm handoff to a live desk to put in the ticket after the fact, let's solve the problem. It's definitely been a struggle for a long time. It's we're a lot more reliable now than we were before. So it's not as big a deal, but it still happens sometimes. You really want that live support in real time.
IT teams all over are dealing with headcount issues and obviously branch office support. So it's still just a big concern. I think a top of mind, top priority for a lot of IT organizations. How do we manage these devices at scale, day two, and provide that white glove service to our users when they need help in their meeting?
When it's
Yeah.
required.
And how do you justify back to the business that you need resource to do that? Because how do you prove a negative? Like, we didn't get a load of support issues because we
Right.
practically trained. And
Yeah.
the answer you get back from the business is that, well, it all just works. You didn't need to invest all that time and money. It just works. Like, well, it didn't just work. Like, we spent time training users. That's why it was so smooth. So helping the business understand investing and continuously investing in that testing, support, user experience, adoption, training pays off in terms of frustration and user experience later on.
So Tom, remind me, what is the next big Microsoft event that's going to talk about releases and changes? I know we have like 2 a year.
Yeah, so we've got Build coming up very soon, which is the more developer focused event, but that's super interesting because obviously Copilot and AI is the thing everybody's talking about at the moment. So we'll see some more drip feed information about that. So that'll be the next one where it's mostly dev focused, but no doubt we'll hear a little bit about what's going on. And then later on the year we'll have the partner conference, which is Inspire, and again you get a lot more there, and that's when Microsoft kick off because their financial year ends mid-calendar year. That's where we get to hear what the priorities are for Microsoft for their coming financial, where they're placing their chips, what they want all the partners to be talking about. So that's one to watch out for as well.
Inspire, got it. No
It
problem.
sounds like Copilot's going to be the big deal for the next
It-
at least 2 years, 3 years.
It really is, and it's that's the right time frame because Microsoft are massively riding the hype train. Everybody's legitimately excited about this, and it is going to be massively impactful. But it's also going to be a journey. Like, we're not all getting Copilot tomorrow. Everything they announce about Copilot is coming soon in testing. So Microsoft just gave 600 customers early access, so they're testing very carefully. They're building it out there. They're seeing how it goes. So yeah, that's the kind of time frame, Joe. You're right. Is like we'll see drips coming out, new features coming out, but it will be massively impactful to particularly our space, with the things you can do like meeting summarization and all the clever AI layout stuff. It's really exciting.
I'm super looking forward to just not having to attend all of my double booked meetings and send my AI to go join that meeting.
Well, this is the running joke. At what point do the AIs all meet up and just give us the tasks back to do? So your AI talks to my AI and tells us what we need to do.
Yeah.
I think I saw something online this morning as a joke that said having AI write the poetry and the prose, and having the humans handle the hardware and product deliveries wasn't the future that he had in mind. But it's interesting. AI is going to be the hot topic going forward, and if you're not talking about it or paying attention to it, you should be. One more hype cycle to live through before we get to the next one. So Joe, where do we see you next? You're going to be in InfoComm?
Yeah, I'll be at InfoComm. I'll be in the Poly HP booth doing booth tours and information sessions around our Teams room systems and our newly certified Android devices. So we'll be showing off a few things there. We've got a couple big announcements slated. So highly recommend, if you're going to be in the area or at InfoComm, come by and say hello and check us out.
That's in Orlando, June 13th to 16th this year, or
Correct.
14th to 16th, something like that. And if you need access, by all means, just ping Joe, ping myself. We can give you, free registration codes and let you know how to meet up with us and get you involved in some of what we're doing. Tom, what about you? Where do we see you next?
Yeah, actually, it's been a long run of shows, but there's nothing major coming up for a while. So I think my next thing, probably in certainly stateside, is the UC Expo USA show in Austin. So I'm looking
In
forward to
Austin.
that one.
Joe and I were
Yeah.
just talking about that. The three of us will be together in Austin. We can do a show live.
Oh well, let's do a live show. That'd be really, really good. So yeah, that's my
That will be.
next big trip. But otherwise, we're adding stuff to Empowering Cloud Weekly and LinkedIn, all the usual haunts. So if people have got ideas, questions, feedback, then yeah, LinkedIn or Empowering Cloud, you can find me.
So that was the next question. How does somebody get in touch with you? It's empoweringcloud.com. No, it's
It's
empowering.cloud.
empowering.cloud. Yeah. .cloud domain. I was ahead of Microsoft with the weird domains.
Okay. And what about you, Joe? Somebody wanted to reach out to you.
Yeah, LinkedIn, just search the name Joe Dalecki and you'll find me. There's not a whole lot of Daleckis out there, so it should be pretty easy to find me. There's not a whole lot of you either.
No. You're not many Arbuthnot either.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you doing the talking while my throat's a little bit raw right now. But that's it for this week's edition of Poly Weekly News. Thank you very much for spending the time with us. You know, it's important that we're able to reach out to you and give you this information. We know it's a time commitment on your part, and we certainly do appreciate it. For all of my colleagues at HP and Poly, I'm David Danto. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.